Then it's number 6. Good thinking promotes the building of understanding. What exactly is good thinking?
Right, okay. Now, if we go back, we've been talking about the other core principles that you need to teach the key concepts, right?
Right.
So you're not going to learn without important knowledge. There's been a kind of argument in education. Do you teach more knowledge or do you teach more process skills? And thinking is a kind of process.
Isn't it a mixture of both?
Absolutely. You can't have one without the other. I mean, an example I'll give you is I used to have an Italian car in England. Rather silly thing to do in England, where it's kind of damp most of the time, and typically on a damp day I try and switch it on and it wouldn't work. Now I know a little bit about thinking, and I know that something in that car is not working.
Right.
So I'm aware of analysis and evaluation. So something is not working that's affecting the ignition. However, can I fix it? No, because I don't have the knowledge. So there's two very important things to bear in mind in learning. You must have the important knowledge to build understanding. What thinking is using your mind in particular ways.
Right.
To say, well, okay, well, I've got this knowledge. How is this connected to that? Is this part of a system? What are the parts of that system? How do things compare and contrast with other things? What's the big picture here? What is this? How important are these things? Now, this is sort of sometimes referred to as critical thinking. Sometimes we say, well, can we look at things differently? This metaphor, think out the box. I mean, what it basically means is that you make new connections in your head and come up with a new perception that leads to a new idea. Okay. But it's essentially conscious mental activity to solve a problem. Now, thinking occurs at a conscious level. As I'm talking to you now, as we're making this tutorial in this video, I'm thinking about what I'm saying.
Right.
But the interesting thing about thinking, it actually works subconsciously and unconsciously. Okay. So you can actually be laying in bed and thinking, but it's at a much slower level.
Right.
But the key principle is this, that we want our students to think better, because when they think better, they engage more critically. Okay. More systematically, more effectively with the information that they've been given.
Maybe the question is then, how do I promote this process in my students? How do I get them to engage in good thinking?
Right, yeah. That's very important. Well, if you're aware of what good thinking is, which is to analyse things, to look for connections, then you'll say to students, look, we're looking at a problem here. The circuit board's not working.
Right.
Now then, what do you think is stopping it from working? Now you would want a student at a basic level to say, well, perhaps one of the parts faulty or there's not a connection. So let's do an analysis. Let's check that it's all connected.
Right.
It's going back to the car situation, that a good mechanic right away will look at what's happening and think, well, it's probably not this, probably not that. I've seen this problem before, the compare and contrast. So the inference and interpretation, it will be this and this. And then they would then say, right, well, let's use this test that. And that's how experts fix things quicker. Because what they've done in the past is they've done good thinking, they've built up a very solid knowledge base.
Right.
And most of the solutions are sitting nicely in their long-term memory system. So the kind of thing is funny, the kind of thing is quite funny, because we need to think in order to learn.
Right.
As we become experts, in many cases we don't have to think so much because we actually know the solution. So we have an illusion of being a great thinker.
Right.
But essentially it's the thinking that we've done over the years and the building of our knowledge bases, which mean that you can look at that problem and say, seen it before, probably this, it comes very easy. Whereas somebody who's a novice will say, well, what do I know? Well, let's start thinking now. Right. What information do I need to get? And it's that process over time that gradually moves you from initially being a novice, knowing nothing, to having different degrees of competence, to being an expert. Edward de Bono, famous psychologist, got a planet named after him, once said, in a perfect world, we would not have to think.
Right.
Now then, think about what that means.
Yeah, make sure I'll be practicing good thinking.